I think it's really important to recognize that this is an evolving path and it's not linear. So sometimes we feel like we progressed a lot and then something happens where we act back in the ways how things were before our healing journey started, and we may fall in the trap of becoming too critical or too self-loathing or however shameful we feel in these moments. So it's important to remind ourselves and be very gentle in approaching even the biggest mistakes that we make in our life, and introducing that self-compassion and talking to ourselves as if we talk to someone we deeply, deeply care about. This healing journey, like I said, is nonlinear, ongoing, lifelong, and it's going to continue to evolve and expand. And when you make mistakes, it's okay. So please be gentle with yourself.
This is the Conscious Economics Podcast, and I'm your host, Rhiannon Rosalind. This is the place where we explore people, planet, profit, and art through the lens of the new economy. If you're interested in changing yourself, getting more creative, or changing the system at large, then this is the podcast for you. Tune in every other week as we explore these topics with amazing guests. We'll go deep, we'll go heart-centered and soul-felt as we go into how we change ourselves and change the world. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Conscious Economics Podcast. It is officially season 4, and I'm so excited to be back. It's been a long break. We had a great summer, so many incredible things happening. And this month, we're so excited to be launching our Mindfulness and Money annual membership, which I'm going to talk about in today's episode. So thanks, guys. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm so excited to tell you about who the guest is for our first show back of the season. And it's our beautiful financial therapist and the co-founder of Mindfulness and Money, Aseel El-Baba. I know many of you know Aseel, those of you that have been following and watching the content. But for those of you that don't, Aseel is the co-founder of Mindfulness and Money, and she is a financial therapist. She spent a decade working in the Canadian banks and grew her career in the financial planning and managing sector with a portfolio of over $100 million on Bay Street. So she enjoyed helping her clients with crucial financial decisions, but she felt that there was something majorly missing. And so she decided to go back to school and become a psychotherapist, pivoting into the world of financial therapy in March of 2020, which was the beginning of the pandemic. Crazy timing. So she helps her clients and our community members address financial challenges using an emotional, psychological, behavioral, and relational tool and lens, and helps them with overcoming financial hurdles that are intertwined with all of these different aspects of ourselves. She's also the CEO of Holistic Optimal Wealth, which is her own practice, which is on a mission to explore and heal people's relationship with money. And she's a member of the Financial Therapy Association and the Canadian Association of Psychodynamic Therapy. She's a public speaker, a thought leader, and I love her so much. I'm so excited for you to hear our conversation. We definitely went deep. We talked about so many important things, including all that's happening on the planet right now. And I just want to acknowledge that if you are feeling tender, if you are feeling raw, if you are feeling anxious, scared, sad, we feel you. I understand, and I hope that this podcast and this show can be a place where you can come and feel safe and let your nervous system relax and know that there are many of us out here that are trying to build something better. So holding space for that, and thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoy this episode with the lovely Aseel El-Baba. Hi, Aseel. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so happy to be here.
And we're laughing a little because we had a little recording issue. So we're coming back in and we're trying to invite our listeners back to the space that we were creating here. And that space started off with me just reflecting on why I wanted you to be the first guest on our season 4 of the Conscious Economics Podcast. And that reflection was taking me to a deep place of gratitude. And I was reflecting on 3 reasons why I wanted you to be the first to christen this season The first being that you have had a profound impact on my life. You have provided such a deep reflection for me and a mirror for me of my own mission and vision, because you share a very similar mission and vision. You've been such a wise teacher and guide and mentor for me. I've learned so much from you, and I've healed so much in your presence and under your guidance and wisdom. So recognizing that. And you also birthed one of my favorite humans on the planet, which is your son, who's turning 1 this week, which is amazing, but that's a digression. And lastly, you're my business partner, and we have created this beautiful Mindfulness and Money organization and project. And for the listeners that are tuning in now, this episode is airing, and that means it's November, and the actual Mindfulness and Money annual membership course has launched. So we will talk about that. But for all those reasons and so many more, I wanted to have you here as the first guest. So I'm so honored to have you. Thank you.
I echo everything you've shared, and I feel so humbled and grateful to have someone like you in my life. And I reflect on when we were co-creating the vision statement for conscious economics and talking about co-creating the new economy radically with love, and also how the term economic healer emerged organically from that conversation, and helping us recognize that that's really our calling and also what we're here to do. And the fact that we saw that in each other is really, really profound. And the way I reflect on that is my journey prior to meeting you was focused on the individual, how money trauma shows up in our individual lives, how it impacts our careers, identity, relationships, how we parent, how we work, how we show up, period, in whichever way we do. And then when I met you, I think you brought a really interesting layer to the macro, to the systemic, to the global, to the visionary that you are, in understanding how, like you say, the economy is the extension of our value system, and how the economy represents what we prioritize and where our consciousness is as a collective in that particular moment. So it widened and created a really interesting layer that I now wanted to even dive into and integrate in the work that I do, because the systems have to function for the sake of the individual, and the individual has to create the system. So it's very intertwined, and I love that dance in between.
I love doing that dance with you as well. And I think that you need both happening simultaneously. So
100%.
the way we change the system is by each individual making those changes. And then as each
100%.
individual makes them, the system, becomes anew. So it is so beautiful. It's such an amazing reflection. And for me, you brought a level of clarity and sophistication and actual tangible tools and resources. As you being a financial therapist, actually, you legitimized what I was trying to do, because my place that I teach from is definitely from the place of the wounded healer. I have deep, deep wounds with money, and I've worked with myself individually in order to understand those wounds, some of which are still present, and to help others through that experience, that lived experience. And I know, although it's a little bit different, you also have some of those wounds and have been able to alchemize them into the healer that you are and the healing that you give. So do you want to tell our audience a little bit, for those of you that might be hearing you the first time? I find that hard to believe, but we're getting new people all the time tuning in. So share with us a little bit, what's your story, and how did you become this beautiful and powerful economic healer that you are? Where did it begin?
The first time I ever declared or started even thinking about my purpose and mission here in the world started at a very, very young age. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and there was a lot of chaos in the environment that I grew up, coming from South Lebanon. And that chaos was literally surrounding my house and in the house that I grew up in as well. To give you perspective, The neighborhood that I was in was deserted. A lot of the neighbors fled Lebanon looking for better lives. So a lot of my childhood was looking at literally deserted homes. And the school across the street from me was turned into a military camp. So we didn't have much cable or a lot of childhood cartoon networks or things like that. So it's the combination of all these elements that forced me to spend a lot of my childhood in solitude. And when I was in these deep solitude, I would ask us existential questions from such a young age about what am I really here to do, and trying to make the sense of all the chaos I was encountering. And in one particular day, I remember there was some shootings happening across the street, but also my parents were fighting. And I just couldn't handle. It was just too much for an 8-year-old to go through. And in my brother's room, I started drawing on a piece of paper, my first, what I call now, business card. I didn't have a concept of what that is at the time, but I wrote my name and I started drawing butterflies and flowers and things like that. But underneath it, I said, the changer of the world. Because in that moment, I declared that I wanted to change the world. And I believed it like wholeheartedly, and it was unquestionable, unshakable desire for me. Then carried forward to different initiatives, from joining a peace ambassador program in Lebanon to working with different refugees to launching different initiatives to protect the planet and educate people on pollution. And it started launching in different ways, whether it was initiatives to save the planet or for human rights, or I just wanted to dabble into everything that I can, especially because growing up in that environment, there were too many issues that we were encountering collectively as a society. And before I knew it, I came to Canada at the age of 16. I was with a single mom, and we had to heavily rely on government assistance to get us on our feet. And because I had really good marks, I graduated with honors, and I was one of the youngest financial advisors in the bank. That was primarily, I started my job at the bank actually when I was turning 20, and by 22 I was a financial advisor. And it became such an imposter syndrome and a moment of deep dissonance in trying to make sense of this new business card that I carry, knowing the financial struggles that not only I've been through throughout my life, but that I'm still continuously going through with my family. And I had to grapple with this gap between this identity I was now trying to show up as this professional who's advising people on money, but also some of the pains and the traumas I was still trying to heal from and make sense of. So I struggled a lot with the concept of money from the get-go, because that changer archetype that I declared from a young age had that social desire. I wanted to be a helper, a social worker. I wanted to potentially do nonprofit work. And I never knew how money coexists or intersects with these, what I perceived to be noble work, essentially. I felt that my identity is now crashing being in a corporate environment advising people on money, when all my life was preparing me to just give back and do good and better the world. But anyways, I tried to make the most out of my time there, and realized that being in a client-facing role gave me the opportunity to create that impact, but never in what I perceived it would be. So I started really delving into every topic I can find around money to elevate the quality of my work beyond just the conversation on what your investment strategies are, or what the market is up to, or how I can support you in covering your debt or cash flow management. I started looking, because of that vision I always had about the soul of money, the energy of money, the art of money, and made a commitment to myself that I needed to start rewiring all these negative beliefs I grew up around money, so I can walk the walk and talk the talk. And I bought my first condo at the age of 28. And that was also around the same time where I started to deeply recognize that regardless who I was serving, whether it's somebody who was barely able to meet their monthly cash flow needs, or somebody who has millions of dollars and don't know what to do with their money, the conversation was missing so much elements. And one of the things I actually recently came to recognize, and something I joked with my manager in the bank about, was that out of all the tools that I was equipped with as a financial advisor, from like charts to strategies to financial plans to calculators, the tool that I used the most was my tissue box. And that's because naturally, as the person I am, I always go deep with my clients. It just came natural to me. And in doing so, I was starting to help them understand how money is intersected with all these layers that they're actually talking to me about, because they thought they're coming to discuss their money and they end up talking about their marriage, their career, their transitions, death, marriage, birth, identity, purpose. Like, so many layers just surfaced as natural parts of the correlations that I was seeing. And that's when I made the commitment, especially after hearing them refer to me as their therapist, because that's what you expect to talk about with your own therapist, that I did have a deep yearning desire to equip myself with a different set of tools. And I went back to school and I trained in a 5-year psychotherapy program and started my financial therapy practice in 2020. And that's when I met you, and here we are today.
Oh my goodness. When I listened to the story, especially the part of you being a little girl and making that first business card, I can't help but like tear up and cry. One, because it's so like true to who you are. Like I know you, and I know that that is just so who you are. You are here to do that, and so earnestly. But also because it makes me like long and wish that I had have known you then, because we would have gotten along so well. Because I felt, in my own ways and with my own challenges, similarly drawn to the same, and like kind of a weirdo for it. Like I didn't want to do the normal, regular things that everybody wanted to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember like when you're a teenager and like your girlfriends are just like in a circle talking about the cute guys. I would just go grab like an empty garbage bag and go around lecturing people not to throw their garbage on the floor and things like that.
Oh my gosh, it's amazing.
That's how I wanted to spend my recess.
I love it. Well, I was going door to door selling environment cookies that my grandma made. Knocking on every door and like having a conversation with random people that I didn't know. So I do get it. With that said, and because we're on the topic of that upbringing, and you opened that up so beautifully, and I reflect on right now what's happening in the world, and in particular in the Middle East. And I know that this is an extremely sensitive topic, but it's one that I know you and I have felt we have to address as leaders, as economic healers. And so during this very tender moment on the planet, and in particular for you with the lineage that you represent and hold, I wonder what you feel as an economic healer. What do we need to know about these very difficult times right now on the planet? What wisdom do you have to share?
One thing I know is that war represents the most profitable industry in the world right now. There's so much profit that happens as a result of war. Actually, I remember once being in an economics class and our professor was showing us how when the US was close to a recession, almost always there's a war that follows to distract from that, but also to bring money back into the country and the economy. And that planted a really vivid picture in my mind around the correlations between politics, the economy, the global affairs, and things like that. Because I grew up being in a war zone, always having that understanding, but never having like actual charts to prove it. Hearing constantly about like warlords and corruption and how a lot of people benefit from war. And I could never understand as a child, because when you're a child, you're so pure. I couldn't understand how certain people enjoyed or benefited or wanted to profit in these horrendous, horrific atrocities. So knowing that my calling is in the financial healing space, and drawing back on the conversation you and I were having earlier, how the work starts with the individual and the impact that can have on the collective is very powerful, even in the times where it really doesn't feel as such. When we are grappling with like big headlines, we do feel helpless and powerless, undoubtedly. But for me, it's always been very helpful to think about, what is it that I can control? What is the work that I'm responsible for? And that for me is healing my own trauma, healing my own relationship with the economy of the world, and passing on these teachings to my clients, my community, my son, my people who cross my path, while I also learn from what they have to pass on to me. So I recognize that money trauma is very correlated with some of the atrocities we're witnessing right now. War is specifically what's in the forefront, but we've witnessed other global crazy pandemics that we've also experienced, from climate change, from, whatever happened around COVID, whatever is happening sometimes in different things, like the unfortunate and unfair treatment of certain employees in countries where some companies profit off. I'm losing my proper articulation because I feel deeply unregulated with this topic right now. It's very fresh.
I understand.
And on times where I feel unregulated, I lose my proper eloquency in finding the right words, because the words really we can't process what's properly going on, and words do fail us in the moments like that, which is why I'm also a fan of somatic therapy and like going back into the body and moving through some of these emotions, because words will fail us.
100%.
So to go back to the main question about why our work is important, because you and I recognized how money correlates to these global issues that we're constantly facing as a humanity.
Yes.
And we are operating under this theory right now where, with financial therapy, bridge the gap. With financial therapy, help heal our people, our planet. And what would that look like?
I think everything that you've said here is so wise and resonates so deeply with me. And similar to you, I have always felt drawn to understand the system, or understand why I didn't understand how it functioned in such a way that I could just tell from my, youngest years that there was something didn't add up, that something wasn't making sense. And, growing up here in Canada, I obviously wasn't exposed to the same aspects of the military-industrial complex that you were so vividly, in living in a war-torn zone and being right across from a military base is very, very in your face. But I witnessed the subtle enslavement of people and the oppression of people due to economic, systemic oppression. And whether that be family members or people in my community. And so again, when I, got to university, I became so interested in the study of these systems and these systems of oppression and what was really driving them. And, learning about slavery and learning about the military-industrial complex, learning about colonization and imperialism, and how these, ideologies and these ways of operating have infiltrated every aspect of our lives all around the world. And that is really where we stand today, that it's going to take a massive up-leveling of consciousness if we're going to step into something new and different and from a place of love. And that's why when we, created that co-creating the new economy radically with love, and that was, a task or a slogan that we came up with together. And it's such a deep thing to say. Like, there's so many layers to just that one sentence. So I just feel so grateful.
Yeah, every word, you can dissect it, and there's so much vibration that it holds.
It does. It really does.
Absolutely, because it is a collective work, and the responsibility is on all of us, which in itself almost flips the narrative on the old system where there's a hierarchy of power and there's certain people who control what the rest of us experience.
Yes.
Versus what you and I are calling for as a collective. It's we're all playing our part, and we have sovereignty and freedom, and we are truly working in alignment with the values that we care about the most.
100%. And I think that that's something, like, I want to stop on that point that you made right there, because I think it's such an important thing for people to hear right now, that we actually have sovereignty. And it doesn't feel like it in a lot of places and spaces right now. It doesn't feel like we have the power to change what is so large and overwhelming. But with each and every breath that we have, with each moment that we have, we do get to uphold what our values are, even in the face of some of the worst atrocities that we've ever experienced. We get to choose how we react to that, or if we give our life in the defiance of it. And it's something that I feel into really deeply. I know that that sounds kind of wild to say, but I think often about, what am I willing to lay my life down for? This precious life that we have, that so many of us take for granted, especially here in Western countries where we just don't have to think about life and death every day like some places on the planet. And that's not true for everyone here, obviously, so not making a massive generalization, but what is this life worth, and what is it worth to also give it up, and for what? And what would you fight for, and what would you die for? And, for me, at this particular point in watching everything unfold in the world and looking at my own children and really feeling deeply into, I will die for this. I will die to do my small part in trying to usher in something that is more beautiful, more safe, more loving, more peaceful. And I do believe it starts with the value system of economy.
Absolutely. And I actually sitting with what you're saying, that I will die for this piece, because I'm actually feeling that I want to live for it. I want to flip the narrative, because it's in living for it that I have the life force to actually create. And because of the environment I grew up in, we use that word die a lot. It was just part of our day-to-day. So we were surrounded by that reality. And now a part of my healing is really trying to appreciate every second we have and not taking it for granted, but also making sure it's aligned with the bigger reason to why we're here, which is what the new economy is all about. It's not just working mindlessly and killing ourselves in that process, but feeling vibrant in the work that we do.
Oof.
And recharged by it.
So powerful. Such a powerful flip on that. And another reflection of you helping me. You're absolutely right. I need to change my narrative. I want to live for it. I want to live for it. And hopefully live to see it.
As well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So I want to go into, just because we're on the topic, you just brought up somatic experiences. And I know that in watching you teach and watching you support the community, you use so many different tools in order to help people get outside of just their head and start to think more deeply about their feelings and their subconscious and how their body is reacting to some of these, topics around economy and money. So do you have any particular tools or resources that you like to use on a daily basis that help you? Anything simple that you want to share with us?
One of the helpful things that I find just anchors this concept is to understand what a pattern is. And a pattern essentially has 4 ingredients, if you will. The first is the body sensation, what we experience in our body. And then we have our thoughts, emotions, and then behavior. So tools to create sustainable change involve changing any of these ingredients that interrupt patterns that no longer serve us. So some tools could be like a cognitive behavioral therapy. These are focused more on shifting our thoughts and how we, just become more aware of some of the thoughts and what we internalize and what we actually cement into a belief, because a belief simply is a repetitive thought and it becomes the perspective in which we see the world. So if we want to do like cognitive therapy, it requires maybe journaling, some conscious work around what's happening in the mind, the thought processes and things like that. This pattern interrupt could work in such a way where we interrupt any of these ingredients, whichever we feel is more feasible for us. So I love somatic tools because sometimes it's as simple as a breath work, because again, it's a body sensation. I actually had a session earlier with a client and I was letting her know about those 4 ingredients. And I said, let's practice something together so I can show you in real time how this works. And prior to us doing any breath work, I wanted her to bring awareness to a specific pattern that she's trying to break from. And to bring more tangibility to it, she was having some spending issues, in particular, saying no to spending choices, especially on her children. She was running with the belief that I don't want to disappoint anyone. So just to give you perspective on this pattern that we're trying to break together, she would feel tightness in her chest and restriction of her breath. That's the start of that pattern. The accompanying emotion of that would be shame and guilt and anxiety and worry. The thought is, I don't want to disappoint anyone, which also means I'm not good enough. I keep putting people down. And then the behavior is overspending because she wants to compensate on the uncomfortable emotions and thoughts that are coming up as a result of that. So that was a really vicious cycle that she was stuck in. So some of the tools that we can work with is literally interrupting these 4 ingredients. Now we know what they are. So the first part is bringing awareness to that pattern. The second part is, where can we start interrupting it? And first, the one that I practiced with her on the session is actually bringing awareness to her breath and shifting it from that restricted holding breath to a consciously connected breath. It's actually interesting because we as humans are the only mammals that have breaks in between our breath. And that break in between, when we're holding our breath, that's where trauma is, because we're restricting one of our most important life resources, oxygen, from our body. And sometimes when we're holding our breath, what supports the expansion of anxiety, stress, worry, all these negative emotions that we experience. So something as simple as consciously connecting your breath, which means taking in breath in and breath out in a flowy fashion without any breaks in between, consciously connecting them, automatically within seconds calms you down. And that's exactly what her and I practiced, some consciously connected breath that led her to now feeling calm, more centered, which led her to start feeling differently. We reframed the I don't want to disappoint anyone to I want to be in control of my spending. And that phrase felt unreachable a few minutes ago before this very minute breath work was practiced. But now from a calm centered space, she's able now to reframe the thought in a more productive way. And that helps her control her spending, especially because it's such a feasible tool that you can practice on the spot while you're in the store with your kids.
That awareness and knowing that is, exactly the first step. Thank you for explaining that. That makes so much sense. And it definitely resonates.
But what I wanted to just quickly touch base. So like I said, there are these 4 ingredients and you can create pattern interrupts in different ways. Like I said, cognitive behavioral therapy is a piece to focus on the thought. But what's really important is to recognize that when you're starting to do this work, when this work is new to you in the space of self-development or therapy or whatever work you're immersing yourself in, the work initially starts in hindsight, which means you revisit moments that already took place and you reflect on them and you draw up lessons from them. And as you become more experienced and more well-versed, then the work starts happening in real time. So it's okay at the beginning for it to be things that you're just reflecting on in hindsight. As time goes on and you continue with consistently approaching this work, it becomes in real time. And with time, it becomes proactive.
I love that. I love that. And that's such a great thing for everyone that's listening right now, that you can start by reflecting what has your experience been in the past. I feel like this is a good moment to highlight Mindfulness and Money, because we have just launched the annual membership, and we've designed this very specifically for people to be able to, exactly what you're outlining here, be able to really deeply change their patterns and behaviors when it comes to money in a very supported way. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you've designed this particular program and why?
Absolutely. So when our paths crossed 2 years ago, we right away started creating more content around the space of mindfulness and money with the help of our sponsors. And a lot of the work that we did fell in different buckets. Some of it was like free offerings that we would create some programs around and offer it on YouTube. Others had a workshop component. Some of them were digital, some of them were in person. And then we obviously had, like, I was doing that on my own, be it one-on-one coaching or group coaching elements. And a big part of that is, regardless how we did the work, be it feedback we were getting from people who viewed our offerings on YouTube or engaged with our content, or people who attended our events or digital activations, or people that I worked with one-on-one or in group, there was a constant question that came up. And that question was like, okay, how can I get more of this? And a big piece of it, not just how can I get more of this on my own, but where are the other people who are also engaged in this work? So the word community started to emerge naturally, and we started noticing the deep yearning for it, especially in an area that feels like a taboo and scary and overwhelming for us to tackle on our own. So Mindfulness and Money essentially was, we recognized that through this work now needs to be a community container where we can bring all the pieces of our work together, continue evolving it and growing it and catering to different topics and tackling it together collectively, but also creating a community space where our community can come along with us on this ride, not just engaging with our content and ourselves as leaders and healers in the space, but with each other, because there's so much wisdom that we can draw upon from each other. And that's another really key component in how I would love to structure my life, where things are collaborative and restorative in nature. And a big part of it has to do with the feminine divine that naturally two feminine leaders are going to bring into that space of creating a powerful, safe space that's really important to tackle an issue that's usually taboo and restrictive in nature. So we started exploring that, and we wanted to build a pilot to explore at least what our introductory offer would be. But I know we have a bigger vision to take this to the next level as we expand. What I really want to flip this narrative back to you is because you brought a really unique perspective into this, and that's astrology. And I would love for you to tell our listeners why you felt called to bring astrology into mindfulness and money, and how actually explaining it, how you did that.
Yeah. Well, I love astrology. First and foremost, outing myself that I love astrology, and I've always loved it since I was a little girl. But one of the teachings of conscious economics is really about coming back into balance and rhythm with nature, and really honoring the cycles of nature, the cycles of the seasons, the cycles of the moons, and that this is something that is very deeply healing for us as nature ourselves, because we are fundamentally nature. We're a part of this beautiful planet. We're a living organism on it, and we're interconnected to all the cycles and seasons. And so when I think about what isn't working in the old economy, I think about this idea of trying to skip over natural ebb and flow and not actually allow for seasons, meaning that you hear a lot of companies talk about profit at all cost, and we made this much and now we want to make this much, and it's like perpetual growth at the expense of the well-being of people and the planet. So when I think about a conscious economy, I think about an economy that honors the seasons and cycles and looks to nature as a guide to what it is that we should be doing. So astrology being a really beautiful teaching of cycles. And we know that even just a full moon changes the tide in the ocean. So as our bodies are made of water, the planets impact us in profound ways. And so what we did is for each month in the Mindfulness and Money program, I did a very small teaching on what astrological season we were in. And then we tied the theme that we were looking at through the lens of mindfulness and money to that particular astrological theme. So as an example, when we go into September, that's Virgo season. Virgo's about, practicality and fine tuning and organizing. And so, we looked at those kinds of themes when it came to money. Yeah. So I feel like this particular program, the annual membership program, is a real collaborative combination of our passions and our personalities and what we can offer coming together in this really unique way. And then beyond that, the one thing that you and I both have in common is we see ourselves as community builders, and we have a lot of friends and make a lot of contacts. You meet people everywhere you go. You're like having people over for dinner that you just met on the road. And I grew up in a similar scenario. My house was like a ever revolving door of people coming in and out. And so with that, we have 12 incredible wellness coaches that have come on board to support this as well. So maybe just really break it down really fast. Like, what can someone expect? Like, what does 1 month look like in the program?
So I love that you gave us perspective on how astrology helped inform the themes that we're talking about. Every month is anchored in that theme, and members are going to get 2 videos. The first is, because of the name, Mindfulness and Money. So 1 video on mindfulness and 1 video on money. So the theme would be money and the intersection of whatever it is we're exploring that month. And just to give the listeners a quick perspective on some of the monthly themes, we have money and spirituality, money and sex, money and identity, money and work, money and relationships, and all these different layers. And then a mindfulness tool to accompany that particular teaching to support you in engaging in the content in ways that feels supportive and regulated, so that you are integrating the lessons in your life. A lot of the times where we hear important information or we get a really great breakthrough moment, it's a wasted opportunity if it's not properly integrated into our life. And one of the best ways to understand what integration means, it's our ability to process something on a mental, physical, and emotional level. That is what full integration means. So sometimes if we're only able to engage with something mentally and we can't really feel the emotions or understand the physical sensations that particular experience has, then that gap is traumatic, and that particular issue remains unresolved, and we carry it in our life in the form of unfinished business. What we refer to it in therapy is unfinished business. So integration is our ability to fully experience something fully, mentally, physically, and emotionally. That's how we integrate it. So mindfulness tools help us do that. So it's really powerful that we're giving our members the opportunity to be introduced to a specific lesson around money, but knowing that this lesson could potentially stir up certain things, we are accompanying it with mindful tools for them to integrate that teaching in their life. But we're also going to be guidance for that. We have reflection prompts that are also customized on a monthly basis. to support in journaling, because we definitely promote that as a self-awareness tool and a mindfulness tool across the board. And our community coaching calls that are going to be on a monthly basis as well allows us then to be showing up in that safe container and discussing our breakthroughs, our stories, and all these different things. Then we can deepen our level of understanding and healing together as a community. And this is something I'm really excited about. Aside from obviously the community board that we're also building, where people can engage as much as and as little as they'd like. So that is ongoing throughout the month. You don't only have to wait until the monthly coaching call to be sharing and engaging with other members. So that part is a cool feature as well. And having said that, what really excites me when I look on the horizon is all these in-person events and retreats and conferences that we get to activate in the future once we start building this community, and community of healers, community of mindfulness and money members.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to come together and just bring this work even more collectively, and like you said, a co-creation of what all these things would help us do.
I'm so excited for it. And for those that are tuning in right now and listening, if you're listening to this in real time and it's early November in Toronto, we are going to be hosting an economic healing gathering on November 30th as well, with the intention of bringing our community together and really joining our hearts during this time with so much going on the planet and so much going on internally for all of us. So if you are listening and you're interested to check that out, please do. And if you want to sign up for the program, it's available on consciouseconomics.ca right now. So one thing that had me kind of chuckle in my mind when you brought up the astrology, because I started thinking about how certain people cringe at the idea of astrology. And I don't want to overgeneralize, but I find that a lot of men sometimes don't really connect to astrology. I've had, partners in the past and such, not my husband now. He's beautiful and amazing, loves astrology, is supportive. But I've had people in my past, in particular men, be kind of strange about the astrology thing. And I know that this is a weird sort of sideways launch into this next topic, but I want to talk about the girl math phenomenon. And so this is where I'm going with this. So just this summer, there was a huge viral TikTok trend that started. Yeah. And it's called Girl Math. And it was originally launched by a feminine creator who basically started to, so there was a trend called Girl Dinner where, women would post these weird hodgepodge dinners that they were cobbling together, like a one cheese string and a little thing of hummus and a popsicle. And then it turned into this girl math concept. And so some typical girl math, I'm putting quotes up, girl math is if it's under $5, it's basically free. Or if I paid for a concert ticket a year ago, it's I've already forgotten I paid for it. So when I go, I'm basically going for free. Or I bought something for $50 and I had to return it. And then I bought another thing for $50. So I saved money somehow, or I don't know. It's just this crazy concept. But what happened is it really caught on, and a bunch of people started to share and create their own versions of what girl math is. So it was resonating with many, many women all around the world, and major viral creators were getting into this trend. And I can't lie, although I wish I could say that I didn't relate to some of it, but I do.
Of course.
Oh no.
That's why it caught up.
Of course.
It caught on because it was so relatable.
It's so relatable. So, Aseel, what is going on with us? Why, Aseel? I don't know. Why am I doing girl math?
I think I understand what your question is. So I personally am a huge fan of humor, especially when we're talking about topics that are usually traditional and conservative and boring. Bringing humor is really, really, really fun. And obviously that's what trends become popular because of that. However, I do want to caution that the girl math, personally, I feel reinforces stereotypes that we are actually really trying to break away from. And when we just laugh things off, like, oh, it's just like a girl thing to do, it's potentially jeopardizing the healthy relationship that we're trying to build with money. So on one hand, we can absolutely bring in lightheartedness and humor and self-compassion when we make mistakes or when we do irrational things. Like, everybody understands that money decisions are not rational. They're deeply, deeply emotional. So we can certainly bring lightheartedness in what that can look like. But when we are just falling in that trap of reinforcing stereotypes about women being bad with math and women are just spending machines that have no logic and they drain their money and it never makes sense and all these pieces, because these messages are actually internalized. Especially think about not just adults like us consuming this content and maybe like shrugging it off and laughing it off, but like imagine a 13-year-old who's now watching this content as well, and the internalization of this messaging and what that means for them and how that shapes the belief systems and the behaviors that they're going to grow up around money through. So this is where I feel very wary of these trends, because it does have the impact to shape and influence a whole generation.
100%. And even the fact that it resonates so deeply with so many women points to this deep embedded belief. And I really feel that it's, it's patriarchy in action in so many ways. And if we kind of like dig deeper and deeper and deeper into it, targeting women as these consumer-driven creatures that just use materialism to override everything. And also this idea embedded in the culture that like men are responsible with money and women are irresponsible with money. Like there's so many layers, and I agree that this is stuff that in our programming we're trying to course correct. But I'm also like very much admitting that some of this is true for me. And in particular, and I know that it's not necessarily the way it was presented in the social media campaigns, but this idea that like girls are not good at math. And I grew up really feeling that I was not good at math, and it was almost like normalized because I was a girl. Like, oh yeah, you're a girl, you're not good at math. Oh well, like you'll just take it for, as short as possible and then you'll give it up. But it's interesting when we reflect, no one ever says, oh, you're just not good at reading. Like nobody says that to you. Why is math something that you could be good or bad at? You either learn it or you don't.
I was actually really good at math. I was a calculus tutor, very, very good at it. But I tried to hide that fact because then I associated being good with math as not being cool.
Wow.
Especially because I'm a girl. So I didn't, like, if I got an A+ on my exam, I wouldn't want to share that with my friends. I'd like try to distract them if they asked. So it was interesting because, like I said, we do internalize a lot of these messages, and how it shows up in our life is different. But now with social media, we have the responsibility to create content that supports a expanding belief system for our youth, not one that limits them and reinforces what we ourselves are trying to shatter. And my girl, so I did, like, if I got an A+ on my exam, I wouldn't want to share that with my friends. I'd like try to distract them if they asked. So it was interesting because, like I said, we do internalize a lot of these messages, and how it shows up in our life is different. But now with social media, we have the responsibility to create content that supports a expanding belief system for our youth, not one that limits them and reinforces what we ourselves are trying to shatter and course correct.
100%.
So I wanted to start by saying that I appreciate humor, because it's not just us being serious and like, no, like, let's use humor if we want to, but how about we use humor in ways that also are constructive, instead of just self-deprecating humor.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I feel like there needs to be a new trend on TikTok that's,
maybe you and I would come up with one, because we are funny.
We are, but we notoriously are never good at keeping up with, I don't know, it might be the generation or something, like TikTok. Anytime we've done
like
things,
social media. Yeah, we'll get support on that social media piece, but maybe you and I will come up with a trend that like would still be relatable and funny, and yet also upholds better belief systems that we want to like
100%
integrate in our lives.
So if you're listening out there, send us your ideas. It's really interesting. So on the topic of, again, fun things to talk about when thinking about money, one of our highest ranking original podcast episodes when we did our first season together, you and I, was money and sex. And it was like,
I'm very surprised by that.
It's, again, I don't even know why you're surprised, because sex sells.
I'm obviously being sarcastic.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes I never know with you. Sometimes I think sometimes you were surprised, so you tricked me. No, but obviously sex sells. We know that. But there is this deep correlation between money and sex. And while we were filming the Mindfulness Money annual membership lessons, we had one specific month on money and sex. And you were teaching me some new pieces of content, and I was just like devouring it. So can you talk a little bit about the correlation between money and sex and how we might be able to identify where we stand with money based on some of our behaviors with sex?
Absolutely. And just to voice it out, I feel like a novice in the space of the correlation and understanding money and sex. And because it's something that I'm deeply interested in, I feel that the calling to further my knowledge and understanding of that. But I'll share with you some of the things that I've already been reflecting on and working around, and trying to understand that money is actually one of our creative energies, and so is sex. So both of them are how our creative energy and creative force shows up in our life. In sex, it's literally the creation of life. It's how we became to exist, how we birth and create life. And there's nothing as profound as that. So even when you're not having sex for the intention of procreation, the fact that it has that capability in it is in itself something that helps us channel through a lot of our creative powers.
It's life force energy.
Life force energy, absolutely. And money is also a way in how we channel different form of creation, because we're creating products and services, and how our economy is essentially based on. And what I found interesting is some of the correlations that shows up then in maybe some money traumas that are correlated with some of the sexual traumas that we're experiencing. And that's essentially any form of restriction of the concept of creativity. And I love how you are very articulate on the importance of creativity and art in our life. And that's why conscious economics' fourth pillar is art. But I started to ask questions like, okay, if I step back and zoom out and kind of start understanding some of the patterns that are showing up for myself and my clients around their money traumas, could these patterns also be things that would show up in our sexual intimacy experiences? And a lot of that was the case. And I started trying to understand what that is. So a lot of it could be around feeling deprivation, feeling unworthy, not good enough, inhibited, embarrassed, or sometimes just having dysfunctional compulsory behaviors. So it could be addiction, over consumption, and all these different ways, and how this dysfunctional relationships, anything that's not harmonious or in balance or in homeostasis. So a lot of these things were starting to show up in the work that I do. And now at this time, I'm still not well versed on the sexual aspect of it, but I feel called to study it more and study that intersection even more deeply.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, just some of the few examples that you gave. So this idea of, deprivation, being financially deprived. And then if you look, do you also feel deprived, sexually, intimately? And it's just so interesting. Like all of those pieces that you brought up, you can then look at your own expression sexually and see if those things correlate. And I will say that mine did for sure. Like when I started to think about it and actually reflect on it, I was like, wow, it really does correlate. So it's so interesting how interconnected everything is. And, you know, I think one of the most life-changing and interconnected experiences that a woman can have is actually having a child. And I know that you have become a mom this year, and Aiden is turning 1. And I wonder how you reflect on motherhood and how motherhood has transformed or changed your relationship with money, if at all.
My favorite thing to reflect on is my son. Like, it just gives me an instant fuzziness and warmth and love beyond what words can do justice for. But so first of all, my son's name is Prosperity. And I mean, his name is Aiden, but it means prosperity.
Yes.
I didn't call my son Prosperity. So what's interesting is in times where I faced feelings of anxiety or scarcity, especially because we're collectively experiencing high inflation rates and interest rates and all these different things that are happening in our global economy, and especially here in Canada. I've definitely had moments over the last year where, I mean, I was on maternity leave. I wasn't really making much income, and I was, stressing out. One of the things that I would remind myself is I gave birth to prosperity. And this became like an affirmation for me to kind of just help me align back to the bigger picture and remind myself, actually, that's something I like to work on with my clients as well, that when we're just very aware of how certain prices increased or the cash flow tightness that we may be experiencing, or however this experience is showing up for us, I would remind myself that so is our capacity to increase the inflow. Because sometimes our focus is so much on what's going out, the price increase on that side. But obviously, because you and I are entrepreneurs and people who have more flexibility in controlling their income, we also have power to increase the influx and the flow and what's coming in. And I start shifting gears from feeling constrained and tight and stressed on what's coming out into feeling excited on how I can increase what's coming in. And I do that by reminding myself of the equation that money equals value creation. And as long as I'm creating value, and that value is something that I'm excited about and aligned with my life's purpose, then I'm not going to worry about how money comes in. It will come in, and it just becomes a more assured stance to have. So becoming a mother helped me get to these spaces faster versus being stuck in that scarcity and in that fear of the unknown and the uncertainty that we're obviously all experiencing. The other piece of it is very different, is starting to reflect on, well, okay, money is equal value creation. How can I create this value in such a way that doesn't compromise the kind of mother I want to be, how available and present I want to be to my son? There's definitely been times where I needed to step away for meetings and I needed to, work and things like that. But I've becoming more cognizant on how can I build my business around my life, not my life around my business.
Which is very new economy.
Very new economy, because it prioritizes what matters in life anyway. And that is our family, our health, our relationships. And for me, I'm very grateful that I'm in the business I am with you, because we get to do this together. And I know there's times where you called me out where I wasn't acting from that mindset, because, we recognize the kind of healing journey we're on, but there's times we're going to fall back in the default of what it was like before, that hustle, like that anxious, it's very clear to me and to you, I know that, when we're acting out of anxiety versus when we're inspired and in flow and in our creative element. And I love that we can call each other out when we're,
Yeah.
getting off the road. So I'm very excited about that. And I think becoming a mother reinforced the importance of that for me, to bring in flexibility and, starting to strategically think about a business that is scalable, that creates passive income, where also my work is very connected with my values and purpose, because it's now taking me away from something very precious. And these pieces all are things I continue to refine.
I think these are beautiful reflections. And also, I'm hyper aware that not everybody has the ability to create like this right now. But this is something that, if we're teaching this philosophy, we're trying to live this philosophy, we're trying to embody these philosophies. And it is such a challenging time when you have brought in a new life into the world, because it's one of the most, if arguably not the most important job that there is. And it's not a job that's paid or not well paid. Yeah. And we are lucky here in Canada to have some supports, and there's other places around the world that don't even have that, or have even shorter, very little. But these are conversations to have when we think about a conscious economy. I remember even you sent me a really interesting video on social media, and it was talking about how it really does take a village in order to raise a healthy child, and that a mother needs a village. And now, because that village isn't ingrained in our value system, we're having to pay for the village. Like, we're having to pay for the support to budget and pay for the village. And that's creating this whole additional layer of pressure on us as women and as, businesses. And there's this really interesting sort of movement. It's almost this counter movement that's happening with women. And I've seen it in myself, and I've seen it in many women and mothers post-pandemic, that we're reclaiming our time with our children and saying like, hey, wait, is this promotion worth the time that I'm not going to have with my family or children? And many of us are questioning it, and many women have left the corporate labor force at mass. And we know we've done all of this work. As you know, you were at the table during the Heart Work Project, all of these things. So thank you for your reflections. And I think that as we continue to iterate and make offerings with Mindfulness and Money, I know we've both talked about wanting to serve mothers as one of the real pillars of the new economy and the conscious economy.
100%, a big pillar.
Yeah, it's a really powerful place. And again, calling out that I may be using some generalizations here. We may be talking about things that are specific to our experiences. So I want to hold space for anyone who doesn't feel that they're connected to some of these ways of thinking or being right now. But I feel that our job at, Mindfulness and Money and Conscious Economics is to vision hold for what the future can be, and to try and practice and experiment with that in our own lives. So with all of that said, Aseel, thank you so much for being with us today. That hour flew by. I feel like I can talk to you for a million hours. Maybe the way we can end off is just give us any wisdom you'd like to share when it comes to healing your relationship to money. What would you like to leave everyone with?
I think it's really important to recognize that this is an evolving path, and it's not linear. So sometimes we feel like we've progressed a lot, and then something happens where we act back in the ways how things were before our healing journey started, and we may fall in the trap of becoming too critical or too self-loathing, or however shameful we feel in these moments. So it's important to remind ourselves and be very gentle in approaching even the biggest mistakes that we make in our life, and introducing that self-compassion and talking to ourselves as if we talk to someone we deeply, deeply care about. So this healing journey, like I said, is nonlinear, ongoing, lifelong, and it's going to continue to evolve and expand. And when you make mistakes, it's okay. So please be gentle with yourself. And we really hope that you join our community, because it's going to be a beautiful collective, global collective that not only supports you in healing the relationship you have with money and how that shows up for you in life, but because it intersects with all the different layers of your own life, but also the systemic and global things that we started this episode talking about, you will have the capacity to change the world with us. So it's our invitation to help you be a part of a changing world force over here.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Aseel. And we're so excited to have had you be the first guest. And so for anyone that's listening out there, do check it out. Mindfulness and Money. You can just Google it, consciouseconomics.ca. We hope to see you if you're local out in Toronto on November 30th. And we will be back next week. Well, 2 weeks because we're new economy pacing over here. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you soon. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for tuning into that episode. I hope you enjoyed hearing Aseel's story and her reflections. If you are interested, like we mentioned, you can check out and sign up for Mindfulness and Money, the annual membership. You don't have to be starting in November. You can start any time of the year and get the full 12 months. So it is always ongoing. Just to remind you, the program allows you to get a teaching every single month on a unique money topic. It gives you a unique mindfulness tool from our wellness coaches. You get some written journal prompts, and then you get live community coaching with Aseel and myself every month, showing up for you to help you really integrate and transform your relationship. So do go onto the website and check it out. It is meant to be priced very accessibly for people. We're trying to democratize access to this service. But if for some reason those price points are still not in reach for you right now, we do have scholarships available. So if you are someone who is interested but do not have the means currently right now to be able to sign up, please do reach out at info@consciouseconomics.ca and we can share with you where scholarship opportunities are available. So with all of that said, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your week, and we will see you back on the next episode of the Conscious Economics Podcast. Bye for now.